Welcome to r/RedditRevenge. This is a story of someone getting back at someone with revenge after being wronged. Thank you, friends, for subscribing to the channel and for so many likes. The first story, local schmuck breaks CSO probation conditions, decides to go on the run. The second story, I quit my job and took 4 workers with me. The third story, the client is not always right. And the first story is ProRevenge from a Revenge Pro. If you think about it cynically, one of the functions of the police is to provide a sort of society-wide revenge service. Unfortunately for this sub, it's usually kinda boring. When cops do take exceptional revenge, it's usually unfortunate and icky, like a dirty beating in the no-camera areas of the cop shop, or giving someone the silent patrolman treatment during transport. Fortunately, most cop revenge isn't dramatic, it's procedural. You misbehave, we do the paperwork, and eventually some consequences happen or not. Sometimes, however, you get a chance to take a bit of vengeance. That is, I hope, the very definition of professional. For a time, I was a small-town Canadian cop, working in Hicksville province. Several years before I came to work in the town, there was an event which entered town legend and made national news, the funny little throwaway story they go to just before the end of the broadcast. Some kids committed an act of spectacular and iconic vandalism and cost the town quite a bit of money. They were all caught, tried, and sentenced to probation terms with restitution. I would love to provide details, but anything more would be immediately identifying. All but one of the kids paid off quickly, served their probation without major incident, and moved on with their lives. These were juvenile sentences, and would in the ordinary course of things be purged from their records about 2 years after completion of probation. Unfortunately for one of them, whom we will refer to as Lackwit hereafter, this was only the beginning of a pattern of failure and incompetence that would mark his life from then on. Lackwit came from the kind of low-down redneck family that can't meet the standards of a transient's trailer park. They lived in decrepit trailers on a semi-serviced rural property that someone lent them out of pity. I wish I could tell you the moronic and laughable names these cretinous parents inflicted on their kids. Think Jesse James for the boys and Jezebel for the girls, and you're aiming too classy. I suppose his unfortunate nature wasn't his fault, but Lackwit seemed so dedicated to his banal evil and low-grade crime that any sympathy I might have had just kind of melted away. When I first arrived at the post, I was given my share of the list of area's repeat offenders, who it would be my job to keep tabs on. Basically, the boss divided up all the guys and gals on probation, or other court supervision, and every constable was responsible for any new charges involving one of their guys. Lackwit was to be my problem for the next 3 to 5 years. I spoke with his probation officer and was told that Lackwit hadn't paid 1 dime of his restitution, and in fact had been charged with breaching his probation by not doing so. He had also not been doing required community service, had missed probation appointments, and was generally not a great subject. She recommended additional breach charges, which we duly laid. The matter wended its leisurely way through the justice system, and eventually, Lackwit appeared before a judge. Out in these rural circuits, the judges come by 1 day a month, and it's frequently the same judge seeing these redneck recidivists again and again. This judge turned out to be the same one who had sentenced Lackwit to his probation for his initial vandalism and the subsequent breaches. Of course, on each of these occasions, Lackwit had begged the mercy of the court, promised to get his life together, and so on. Understand, we're now more than 4 years out from the initial vandalism event. This might have worked on this occasion too, but the restitution became a sticking point. This town was small, and they needed the money from the restitution to repair some of the damage. We had a victim statement from the town about the things they couldn't afford to do without raising rates on their taxpayers. We had evidence of the reasons Lackwit wasn't holding down jobs: attendance, unreliability, pot use at work. And we had evidence of the money he had made, but not bothered to pay to the town. Judge decides to throw the book at Lackwit this time. He puts him on a CSO. Although Lackwit's original charges were youth charges and would have been purged, his breach of probation occurred after his 18th birthday, so is an adult charge and semi-permanent on his record. Nice work, chump. A digression on the Canadian justice system. We don't like to put people in prison. This is for a number of reasons. We're cheap, and prison is expensive. Our jails are hideously overcrowded and ill-maintained, and it flat out doesn't work anyway. Trust me on this. If you aren't committing crimes against persons or involving sex or firearms, you aren't likely to go to jail on a first offense, unless you're doing damage or stealing into the millions. End digression. A CSO is like a super probation order. It's technically a jail sentence, but one you serve outside of a jail. The judge can order you to stay at a particular location, can give you a curfew or house arrest, can impose practically any conditions he or she feels will assist you in successfully completing your term. The CSO also has some procedural differences from a probation order, which will be important later. In this case, it had a pretty strict curfew, among other things. Lackwit is terrible at complying with his order. We give him a few warnings about curfew breaches and notify his PO. Lackwit is formally cautioned. It comes to pass that Lackwit asks probation for permission to do a thing and is denied. Lackwit does the thing anyways and becomes aware that we know about it. We stop by Lackwit's house to have a discussion, and Lackwit decides to go on the lam. He rabbits, and we don't see him again for a while. A breach of the CSO is filed and approved by prosecution. At this point, Lackwit knows he's going to be jailed for at least a week or two, and being a virgin jail-wise, has no intention of being caught. Over the next few weeks, we're told by sources, you would call them snitches, what Lackwit is up to. He's couch-surfed until he wore out his welcome with his few friends, and is now living in an abandoned car behind a friend's house. Friend's dad hates him, so Lackwit has to sneak in and out and spend his days wandering disconsolately around town, trying to find people to hang out with, or who might lend him money. I begin to see Lackwit around town, but pretend not to. I go by his house from time to time, but he's never home. Sources say his parents want him to turn himself in, get us off their backs, but he's convinced he's going to jail. I visit his friends and make a point of being very obvious when I visit friend's house with the derelict car. I never find Lackwit, but am told that he spends several cold nights in the bush after our visits. At this time, I have a Rookie with me. One day we come across Lackwit and he bolts. Rookie is gung-ho and she starts to chase. I catch up, and after a token effort, tell her to stop. She asks why. We could have caught him. Heck, Lackwit is lanky, but has the grace and coordination of a professional esports player, even with 20 kilograms of crap strapped on. Catching him isn't going to be a problem. Look, I tell Rookie, I don't want to actually catch Lackwit. Rookie is baffled. We've been out to look for Lackwit maybe a half a dozen times this month. I explain, the thing is, Lackwit is punishing himself far more than the court will, and he's providing a great lesson to his friends about the consequences of this kind of life. Now, the thing about a probation order is that it has a fixed duration. From the date you begin to serve it, it runs for X months. If you're out of the country, in jail, or on the run, the order still runs out. CSO doesn't work this way. If a CSO breach is filed, the CSO stops counting down. I tell this to my wide-eyed Rookie, then add, if I'd picked him up 3 months ago, he'd have done a week or so in cells with a warm bed and 3 meals a day, then been out again with a firm slap on the wrist. This way he can live like a hunted animal until he gets tired of it, then serve the same amount of time as he would have if he'd just turned himself in. He ended up turning himself in a couple months later, when the fall nights got a bit too nippy for him. For the next few years, I would use this story, now well known locally, of Lackwit's car apartment to frighten young juvenile offenders and to convince them to comply with probation. The second story is, call me a C, I'll shut your restaurant down and get you fired. I've had a lot of random jobs in my life. I was working as a waitress in a rural area hotel restaurant a few years ago to get away from the city. It was the kind of place that only stayed open because of remote tourism. People went there to see the outback, Australia. While I worked there, I made pretty good friends with a lot of other staff. Chefs, waiters, the hostess, the hotel manager. They got a new restaurant manager in, and she was an a-hole. Cocky, inexperienced, very rude and ignorant. One of those people who walks into a place and acts like they're better than everyone else. I hate those people. Completely unaware and just unlikable. We got along okay because I made an effort to stroke her ego. But one day she called me into the kitchen and yelled at me in front of everyone there. She thought I'd taken the wrong order out to a table, but she was wrong. Why did you take that order out? It was the wrong order. Now everything is effed up. You need to concentrate more. She was really rude and was clearly trying to humiliate me. At one point she called me a C, which in Australia isn't so bad. But still, it's not workplace talk. I took it in my stride in the moment, but as soon as I got back to my trailer, no houses in that town even, I started to organize. I was really mad that this bee of a woman just showed up and started throwing her weight around. If there's one thing I can't abide by, it's unnecessary rudeness and self-importance. She acted like she was so much better than everyone. Calm down, love. You're the manager of an Outback hotel restaurant, not the bloody Hilton. I decided to quit, but that wasn't enough for me. I feel like I had been treated really badly, and the new manager should learn from her mistakes the hard way. There's never any reason in my book to treat people that badly, especially if their intentions weren't bad. I managed to get 4 other people to agree to walk out with me. So out of a staff of 7 people, they were losing 4 people. Me, 2 waiters, a chef, and the hostess. All that were left was a barista who worked 3 hours a day, a dishwasher, and a breakfast chef. I went to the office and explained what happened between me and the manager to the big boss. We were friendly, and he seemed kind of sorry, but not sorry enough to reprimand her. So I handed in my resignation. He acted like I was cutting my nose off to spite my face, and that I should just put up with it, because everyone needs a paycheck. I did it professionally, and made sure he knew that I was leaving because that woman called me a C, and was unprofessional. As I walked out the door, I was like, oh, and I'm taking 4 other people with me. They were outside the office, and all went in to resign one by one after me. They were so short-staffed that they had to shut the restaurant down for 2 months. The woman who called me a C ended up losing her job because there was no restaurant to run, and the people who I left with got a ride with me to the nearest big city and managed to get similar jobs there. So next time you call someone a C to make yourself feel like a big manager, make sure the person isn't versed in revenge. The last story is, customer is not always right in my field. So I'm an ASE certified mechanic. I've been wrenching for 22 years. This story happened way back when I was still in oil change tech and learning my way. This customer comes in one day and wants us to look at his brakes and put some pads on the car that he brought. The shop manager had me bring that car in to look at. I pulled the car in the shop and it's grinding real bad when I hit the brakes. I know it's more than a pad job. So the car goes up, the tires come off, and sure enough, he let his brakes go for so long there's no more brake surface on the rotors. He had worn them down to the cooling fins in the middle of the rotor. I, of course, tell my manager. Well, he told the customer, a crotchety old man, the situation and explains he needs new rotors. We even took him out and showed him there's really no rotor left at all. Naturally, guy gets super peeved, says we're just trying to get more money out of him. We better just do what he wants or he's going somewhere else, blah blah blah. My manager takes it all in cool as a cucumber. When dude was finished, my manager did the neatest thing I'd ever seen at the time. He very calmly explained that the vehicle needed to be repaired correctly or he would red flag the car as it was unsafe to drive. Old boy looked like he was going to explode. Threatened to call the cops if you didn't return his vehicle. We were just crooks, whole 9 yards. My boss said it's cool, I'll call them for you. Called in the State Highway Patrol. Showed them the car in front of the customer. They looked at him and said this car is unsafe for the road. He either fixes it correctly or has to tow it out of our shop if he wants to go somewhere else, because they will not let it on the road. Sad thing is he ended up paying to have it towed, out a few days later. Which I'm sure cost more than the $40 for new rotors. I don't know if he got it fixed right or not. Most wrenches out there just want your car to be safe. We run on the same roads. I didn't know at the time, but I do now, that we do have authority to lock your car down if it's completely unsafe for the road until it's fixed correctly or towed somewhere else to get fixed correctly. I love what I do because I make the roads safer. I also work in a field where, no, the customer is not always right. Old man learned the hard way. A few others in my career have as well. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you liked it, be sure to subscribe to find out when new videos come out.